Juan has a question about the KEF R Series. What is it?
Yeah, the new Metas.
Yeah, so you guys, announcement. You guys see the new KEF R Series Meta announcement? R6 Meta center channel looks interesting, bringing back the 6.5-inch drivers. And he says, Aaron, he hopes that you get to check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to look at the.
Randall says it might be the Doomsday Clock.
They're
talking about in Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So are you planning on checking those out? I know you reviewed some KEF stuff. No.
No, I haven't. I mean, normally, like when I hear stuff like that coming out, because with KEF, I always generally like their stuff, so it's something I'm interested in myself. So I'll reach out. But with everything that's going on, I just it's not been at the forefront of my mind. But maybe at some point, I imagine by the time I get around to it, somebody else like a Mirror or Stereophile or somebody else will probably have measured their stuff. I would be curious though. I did see where.
Is there something Meta?
No, he said the center channel, didn't he?
Well, I mean, those two, any of the R Series Meta speakers, I would be curious about.
So what are they doing different? What's different about these that they haven't done before?
Yeah, so without actually going to look, I'm just assuming that the Meta portion is it's like a labyrinth behind the tweeter, so it's to help stop any kind of resonance from the tweeter chamber. It's kind of like a Helmholtz resonator, almost like. So you have different room treatments, right? And some absorb and some diffuse. And if you have specific frequencies that are problematic, you can build what they call a Helmholtz resonator. So it's the best way I can think to describe it is like a tube that's tuned to the frequency that you want to trap, right? So if 57 hertz is a problematic frequency for you with a high Q, then you can basically build a one note sort of trap, that would just catch that tone. So in some regards, that's kind of like what the Meta does is it uses, you need to see a picture of it because it really does look like a labyrinth. But my understanding is that.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like a disc or something that goes on the back of the tweeter, but it's supposed to capture any kind of resonances that are created on the backside of the tweeter so they don't come back into the tweeter diaphragm and mess with the overall output. I would be more curious about them doing something like that with the mid-range. I'm not in my experience, the Meta LS50s were good speakers, and then the Reference 1 Meta speaker that I reviewed was just fantastic, just a great speaker. But I do kind of wonder, and I'd be curious to know what KEF thinks on this, is why the tweeter and why not the mid-range? Because to me, it just seems like the tweeter is such high frequency that I'm like, do you really have the kind of audible resonances that matter? When I think of resonances, I think of like box resonances and things like that. So longer wavelengths, like the mid-range and things like that. So I don't know. It's interesting to me why they've gone after tweeter. I'm sure they discussed it in some of their white papers. I did see where Jack Ockley Brown was talking about or said on ASR, somebody sent me a link that KEF were going to release the white paper for their new R Series Meta speakers.
That they use that sandwich material, right? Like in between. Are they still doing that?
I don't know.
Like where it's
talking about on the cone?
No, like almost like on the baffle, where it's not really
CLD, constrained layer dampening.
Yeah,
it's like a layer. Is that what you're talking about? Where they have like a layer, and it's like a viscoelastic layer, and then another material. So that's to break up any kind of like resonances from the baffle itself. So anytime you go through a different medium. That's why, in home audio, we talk about if you use not traps, but traps would apply too, but absorption panels on the walls, the advice is to bring them off the walls a little bit because that'll get you lower frequency absorption. And I'm making up a number here, but let's say like you have a 2-inch trap that would go down to maybe 500 hertz or something, right? And again, making up numbers. Yeah. But if you move it off the wall an inch, it might go down to 400 hertz or something like that.
You're adding that air gap behind it.
Right, yeah. So the same kind of logic applies to anything, right? Like anytime you change the material between one surface to another, you kind of make it harder for that vibration to travel through these additional materials. So that's kind of what CLD is supposed to do. It's supposed to kind of separate the two different woods. So if you have MDF, and then you have another layer of MDF. Well, they're glued right together. So you've got one big panel of MDF, right? But when you put CLD in between it, which most people probably think of CLD as like the car audio vibration damper, it's kind of like the same thing, but not quite. But when you put that in between two layers of MDF and sandwich it in, you break up the kind of modes that will travel from one layer to the other.
That's interesting stuff, like using different materials. Like,
make sure to check out our audio-only version of the podcast at anchor.fm/Daily HiFi, or just go to your favorite podcasting service and search for Daily HiFi.